Greetings to everybody. Welcome to the literature reading session. We are at the last chapter 18 conclusion on the talks on the Gita by Vinobha Bhave. Forgive me, some pop-ups come and I have a difficulty with that. So we are continuing on chapter 18 about conclusion and renunciation of the fruits of actions leads to the grace of the Lord. So in this entire chapter of Bhagavad Gita, there are all these 17 to 18 chapters. In these 18 chapters, the first chapter was about Arjuna collapsing because he was distraught and he puts his bow and arrow down and says, I can't fight, Lord. So, what Lord Krishna gave as those 18 verses to lift Arjuna back to perform his duties is this Bhagavad Gita. And it is a profound guide for spiritual realization and right living. And it gives a deep meaning of different paths, different yogas. Because in this, Lord Krishna gives equal importance to Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Bhakti Yoga. And this is the essence of all the 18 chapters. And the entire thing is based on this one statement, that is Tat Tvam Asi. Tvam is the seeker. Tat is that ultimate. And Asi is the connection between the Tvam and the Tat, the seeker and the ultimate reality, the Divine Master. And in these first chapters, it is Lord Krishna talks about Karma Yoga. And this first 6 chapters, they focus on the concept of the Tvam, the self, and the necessity for the selfless action and to purify the mind and how to prepare ourselves for a higher knowledge. I wrote down the chapters down because I am not familiar with the Bhagavad Gita and its topics. First one is known as Arjuna Vishada Yoga, where Arjuna is lamenting about his own pain. And in this second chapter, which is known as Sankhya Yoga, and the essence of Gita is summarized here. Lord Krishna says the soul is immortal, that it cannot be killed. And then he introduced the concept of Sankhya means knowledge. And he introduced the concept of Karma Yoga, which is selfless action. And he instructs Arjuna to perform his duty without attachment to the results. And he asks him to maintain a state of balance, equanimous mind, both in success and failure. Whether you are succeeding or you are failing, you maintain the state of balance. And that is what it is about, the balance. And the third chapter, he talks about Karma Yoga. And he explains the supremacy of action over inaction. Lord Krishna wants us to perform action. He says, even he cannot remain actionless. No one can remain actionless, as all beings are driven by the forces of nature, Prakriti. And he emphasizes that performing our duties with a detachment and self control, particularly for the sake of setting an example in the world. And the next one is known as Jnana Sannyasa Karma Yoga. That means the yoga of knowledge, action, and renunciation. In this, he discusses the eternal nature of Gita and the purpose of the divine masters. And he explains the difference between action and knowledge. And one thing Lord Krishna emphasizes is renunciation is not abstaining from action, but renouncing the desire for the results. And here he says that knowledge is the ultimate purifier. Having knowledge, you have some clarity that purifies you. And then the next one is known as Karma Sannyasa Yoga. That means the yoga of renunciation of action. He teaches Arjuna and that trying to clarify the confusion between renunciation and action. He teaches him that Karma Yoga is action with detachment, and it is a practice. And that leads to the result as renunciation of all actions. And an important thing he emphasizes here is that a person with clarity who is wise sees divine equally in all beings. He says, in every heart there is divinity, and so a wise being sees that. In the next chapter, known as Dhyana Yoga, the yoga of meditation and self control, he gives the method of meditation. He gives the details of the eight path of yoga and the qualities of a yogi, and talks about who practices meditation diligently. His mind is in that state of self control, arrives at the Sthita Prajna state, and because of that, he achieves the peace and he realizes the self. The next chapter is about Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. See, the first 6 chapters were about Tvam, about the seeker. The next 6 chapters is about the divinity, the Tat state. Because in this chapter he focuses on that Tat, revealing that the cosmic form of Lord Krishna. And he says establishing the path of devotion as the most direct way to the Lord. Devotion leads you to Him. So all the practices of karma and jnana and dhyana have to lead the human being to that state of ultimate devotion, because that is the feeling of devotion is what touches the heart of the divine masters. And in the next chapter, it is known as Jnana Vijnana Yoga, that means the yoga of knowledge and realization. In this, he reveals himself about his nature, that he is present in both material and spiritual manifestations, and he is the source of everything. And he talks about devotees who approach him with jnana as well as bhakti. In the next chapter, he talks about Akshara Brahma Yoga. That means the imperishable Brahman, the yoga of the imperishable Brahman. Because Arjuna keeps asking questions about the absolute, about the self, about action, about liberation. So he explains that the importance of remembrance of the Lord, both while living and at the time of death. And there he says, just by taking the name of the Lord at the time of death can liberate you. But it is not just that, is where in Hinduism this concept of naming the children after gods came. But can it really do that? It is the call of the heart for the Lord at the last moment can liberate the being. The call from the heart. And a being that is not trained to calling the Lord every day at the time of death is not going to remember. That is why Daji talks about putting efforts to come to a state of effortlessness, where your heart automatically calls the Guru. And in the chapter 9, it is about Raja Vidya Rajaguha Yoga. That means the kingly knowledge and the kingly secrets. What is this kingly secret he talks about? He explains that the entire universe is pervaded by him, the divinity. And he says this pure bhakti is what is the path. And he says that those who think of him, worship him, and offer him every result of their actions will come towards him. In the 10th chapter, it is about Vibhuti Yoga. Here it's all about divinity. The first 6 was about Tvam, the seeker. The next 6 up till 12th chapter is about the divine himself. He's saying how great the divinity is, how it is manifested, how you can get into that state of being. In this Vibhuti Yoga, he says, he tries to strengthen the faith of Arjuna. And he declares that every powerful, beautiful, glorious thing in this creation is but God's splendor. And here he makes the declaration, I am the beginning, I am the middle, I am the end of all beings. In the next chapter, chapter 11, it's called Vishwarupa Darshana Yoga. That means the yoga of the cosmic vision of the Lord, the universal form of the Lord. Here, Lord Krishna reveals his cosmic form to Arjuna. But Arjuna was terrified looking at this grand vision encompassing the past, the present, the future, and he gets scared, he becomes overwhelmed, and he begs Lord Krishna, come back to the human form, which I am able to love. And this is why Daji always talks about, if God really reveals himself to you, are you pure enough to see him? Even Arjuna, the greatest bhakta, didn't have the capacity to see the Lord. That's why it's probably included there. And it shows how, and he's supposed to be the most devoted to Lord Krishna. So it gives us a clue of what level of purity we should arrive at to truly have the vision of the Lord. In the 12th chapter, he talks about Bhakti Yoga, the yoga of devotion. And here he says, those who worship him with unwavering faith and personal devotion. And he says that is superior to meditating on the impersonal, unmanifested Brahman. So that is why Daji says the meditation should lead us to the state of devotion. In the meditation, you are bringing discipline, bringing the mind to stillness to perceive the Lord. And when you are able to perceive the Lord, true devotion manifests in you. But when the mind is not clear, when there is no wisdom and clarity, you cannot just like that blindly have a devotion, feeling that the presence is everywhere. You can't feel the presence anywhere. And the last 6 chapters are about, Jnana Yoga, the knowledge. And in this, Lord Krishna tries to integrate karma, bhakti, jnana for the final liberation. The next chapter is the interesting one where he says, Kshetra Kshetrajna Vibhaga Yoga. That is, the yoga of distinction between the field and the knower of the field. And this is what Sage Patanjali talks about, the witness, the observer, and the witness. There is something continuously witnessing. So here he clearly distinguishes between the field, the body and the matter, and the knower of the field, Kshetrajna, the soul, the spirit. And it defines true knowledge as a means to understand this distinction, which allows one to perceive the soul, the supreme soul that exists in all beings. In that witnesshood, you could see that every soul is divine. The 14th chapter is about Gunatraya Vibhaga Yoga. It is the division of the three modes that we all learn, the three gunas, the Sat, Rajas, and Tamas. These modes bind the soul to the material body. Through meditation, through karma, through jnana, we refine these modes to arrive at that state of the Sat, which leads us towards liberation. And in the next chapter is known as Purushottama Yoga, that is, Lord is the Supreme. And here he gives the example of the banyan tree, where the roots are above and the branches below. So to survive in the material world, you got to sustenance from the above world. Krishna defines himself as that supreme person. And he is beyond the creation of matter and as well as energy. He is in that absolute. And the 16th chapter is known as Daivasura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga. That is where we learned about the divine qualities and the demonic qualities. Distinguishes between divinity and a demonic person, and how we need to develop these divine qualities of purity, fearlessness, non-violence, and let go of the demonic qualities of ego, hypocrisy, and anger. In the 17th chapter, it's about Shraddha Traya Vibhaga Yoga, the yoga of the faith. And he says, even in this faith, there is sattvic faith, rajasic faith, and tamasic faith, according to the frequency that is dominating in us. And so he discusses about how foods and sacrifice, yajna, dana, food, sacrifice, and chastity and charity are all also based on these three gunas of purity, passionate, and ignorant state of doing it. And finally, at the 18th chapter, he talks about the moksha sannyasa yoga, that is the yoga of liberation and renunciation. And that is the conclusion and culmination of Gita. It defines true renunciation and abandonment of the attachment to the actions, and tyaga, relinquishing it as a performance of duty without any attachment. And here he summarizes the path of karma, jnana, bhakti, concluding with his final instruction to Arjuna: surrender. Surrender to the Lord. Forsake that you are doing all the duties, so he will deliver you. So this conclusion of this Bhagavad Gita is this integration of all these three paths, leading the being to a complete surrender to the divine. Act according to your dharma. Recognize the immortality of the soul and the temporality of the body. Understand the Supreme Brahman, and through bhakti, the most direct path, perform your actions, seeking for the right wisdom and with an attitude of this unconditional love and surrender to the Lord, and that will give you the moksha or the liberation. That is how Lord Krishna concludes this. And in the thoughts of Vinobha Bhave, let us see what he has to say. Arjuna's last question. Dear brothers, By the grace of the Lord, we have now reached the last chapter. In this world of chance and change, fulfillment of any resolve depends on the will of the Lord. Because they were all in jail, and this book was written in the jail. Jail life, in particular, is marked by uncertainty at every step. They were not put in jail because they were criminals, they were freedom fighters. It is difficult to expect that any work started here would be completed here itself. It was also not expected that these discourses on the Gita would be completed here. But the Lord willed so, and hence we have been able to reach the end of the Gita. In the 14th chapter, life or karma was divided into three categories: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. We learned that what is rajasic or tamasic should be given up and what sattvic should be cultivated. The 17th chapter taught the same thing in a different way. The essence of life is yajna, dhana, and tapas. Actions like eating, which are necessary for the performance of yajna, should also be made sattvic and turned into the kind of yajna. Only such actions should be done, all others should be given up. This was hinted in the 17th chapter. We also saw why we should constantly have in the mind the mantra Om Tat Sat. It denotes constancy. Tat denotes detachment and Sat denotes purity. Our sadhana should have these three things: constancy, detachment, and purity. Sadhana should be constant. Only then it can be dedicated to the Lord. All this indicates that only some and not all of the actions are to be renounced. If we look at the whole message of the Gita, we find it advocating at several places that actions are not to be renounced. What it asks us is to renounce is the fruit of actions. Everywhere in the Gita it is taught that we should act ceaselessly and renounce the fruit of our actions. But this is on one side of it. The other side appears to be that certain actions should be renounced while certain other actions should be done. That is why Arjuna asks at the beginning of the 18th chapter, on the one hand, it is said that whatever action we do, it should be followed by renunciation of its fruit, palatyaga. And on the other hand, it also appears that some actions must be strictly abjured while some actions should be done. How to reconcile these two positions? This question has been asked to understand clearly the direction in which life should proceed and to have an insight into the true meaning of the renunciation of the fruit of actions. Actions in themselves are to be renounced in what the scriptures called as sannyasa, while in the palatyaga there is renunciation of the fruit of actions. Does renunciation of the fruit of actions as enjoined by the Gita need actions of renunciation themselves? This is the crux of matter. With reference to the criteria of the renunciation of the fruit, is there any role for sannyasa? What are the limits of sannyasa and palatyaga? This is what Arjuna asks. Renunciation of fruit, the universal test. The Lord has made one thing absolutely clear while answering this question. Renunciation of the fruit is the universal test. It can be applied everywhere. There is no contradiction between renunciation of the fruit of all the action and renunciation of rajasic and tamasic actions. The nature of some actions is such that they automatically fall off when the test of renunciation of the fruit is applied. When it is said that renunciation of the fruit should be associated with the performance of action, it invariably implies that some actions will have to be given up. So tamasic actions, rajasic actions to be given up. When we act in conjunction with renunciation of the fruit of action, it naturally involves abjuration of certain actions. Let us think over it in depth. When we say that whatever actions we do, we should renounce their fruit, actions prompted by desire for the fruit, actions prompted by selfish motives cease immediately. Such actions, as well as actions which are forbidden, being immoral, unrighteous, or ruled out, when it is said that the fruit of action is to be renounced. To act with renunciation of its fruit is not something mechanical, something done without application of mind. In fact, when we apply this test, it becomes clear which actions are worthy of doing and which are not so. Some say that Gita enjoins us to act with renunciation of the fruit. It does not suggest which actions should be done. It does appear so, but it is not true. When it is said that one should act and renounce the fruit of actions, it becomes clear which actions should be done and which should not be done. Actions intended to harm others, actions full of falsehood, actions like stealing can never be done if their fruit is to be renounced. The sun illuminates all things, but does darkness get illuminated? No, it disappears altogether. That is what happens to selfish or forbidden actions. All the actions should be subjected to this test. When we intend to do something, we should see whether it is possible for us to do it without any attachment and expectation of returns. Renunciation of the fruit is the only unfailing test for actions. When the test is applied, actions with desire or selfish motives show themselves as fit to be rejected. They must be renounced. Then pure and sattvic actions remain. They should be done with detachment, selflessness, and humility. Renunciation of selfish actions is also an action, and it should also be subjected to this universal test. Renunciation of selfish action should not require efforts. Thus, we have seen three things. Whatever actions we do, we should renounce their fruit. When the fruit test of renunciation of the fruit is applied, Rajasic and Tamasic actions, selfish and forbidden actions stand rejected. The same test is to be applied to such renunciation too. There should not be any vanity about renunciation, any feeling that I have made so much sacrifice. So, in heartfulness, everything is simple. So, the masters have simplified this process for us with one single stroke. Perform in the remembrance of the master. And when we are performing in the remembrance of the master, we are connected to his state of being, which is continuously the state of Sat, and thereby our heart resonates with it. Our heart is in tune with the Guru's consciousness, so hopefully we cannot make mistakes in this. We are absorbed in that and we are performing our duty. It is like, you're listening to music and you're cooking. Your cooking is automated, you're listening to the music. So your bhakti is what you are absorbed in. The action is automatic. Why should Rajasic and Tamasic actions be abjured? Because they are not pure. So they smear the mind of the doer with impurities. But on deeper observations, one finds that sattvic actions too are flawed. Because so that is where first we transcend the tamasic, rajasic, and try to maintain the sattva, the balanced state. And then even that is connected with the absolute. So you transcend the sattvic state also and are in mergence with the Guru's consciousness. In fact, every action has some or other defect. The swadharma of farming comes to mind as a pure and sattvic occupation. But even in such work, which is of the nature of the yajna, some violence is involved. Ploughing and other operations destroy a number of living beings. When we open the door in the morning, the sun's rays enter the house and kill a number of germs. What we call purification turns out to be a killing operation. Even sattvic work is thus flawed. What is then to be done? I have already said that all the virtues have not yet been fully developed. We have been able to have just a fleet glimpse of qualities like wisdom, devotion, service, and non-violence. It is not that they had fully blossomed sometime in the past. Mankind is learning from experience and making progress. In the Middle Ages, it was thought that agriculture involves violence, so it should be avoided by the non-violent people. They should prefer trade and commerce instead. To grow grains is sinful, but to sell them is not so. Is it not strange? To avoid actions in this way does no good. Restricting the sphere of actions in this way will ultimately prove suicidal. The more a man thinks of escaping from actions, the more will he get entangled in them. If you have to trade in grains, is it not necessary for someone else to grow them? If so, are you not an accomplice in the violence involved in farming? If growing cotton is a sin, it should be equally sinful to sell it. Not to produce cotton on the ground of it being an impure work is a sign of warped thinking. An attitude that goes on rejecting actions of all types on different pretexts is not a sign of compassion. On the contrary, it shows lack of true compassion. We should understand that when that leaves are plucked, a tree does not wither away, it rather gets fresh foliage. In the contraction of the sphere of activities, there is contraction of the self. We will stop here and we will continue.